I am blue, you are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Arron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Arron Blasey, and this is episode number 78. And I just want to tell everybody happy Labor Day. Labor Day was yesterday, so hopefully everybody had a good long weekend, and basically kind of like the last weekend of the summer. And every time Labor Day comes around, I feel like it's the last hurrah, and fall's basically here. And with this colder weather we've been having here in Michigan, it sure feels like it. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I recorded this podcast a couple days ago with Chuck Weldon, and the guy, he actually does, the intro to the podcast here, and he lives out in Missouri. One of the most successful deer hunters that I've ever met in my life, a good friend of mine. I had him on the podcast a while ago, and we talked about basically his ability to pass up really big deer, because he's going after a certain buck that might be bigger. So it's crazy the deer that he's passed up in the past, and he still does it. We actually talked about it on this podcast as well, a deer that he passed up because he was chasing a 200-inch deer. But today is actually part one of a three-part series that I'm doing with Chuck. So what happened was we got into a really good conversation, and like I said, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the best podcast that I've ever recorded to this point. And I'm not downplaying any other guests that I've ever had on here, and I'm not hating on them at all. I mean, every podcast I do I think is unbelievable, but Chuck, his podcast and the knowledge that he spits out here in these three parts is just crazy, and the conversation that him and I had just flowed so well, and I just got every piece of knowledge out of him. And honestly, in this first hour, we talk about a lot of different things, hunting and filming out of box blinds. We talk about a bone to pick that I have with him. We'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast, but I got a little bone to pick with him. So chasing a 200-inch deer, defining your success in a year in and year out, defining what that success means to you. And, we talk about a hunt that I had last year over a decoy and what I did that messed that whole thing up. So it's pretty cool. I mean, we also talk about self-filming, using calls, asking permission from neighbors and everything to do certain things. So this one, there's a lot of good information in this first one, but I'm telling you, part 2 and part 3 are going to be just as good. So I'm going to kind of keep this short and sweet, I guess. I mean, I am about 4 minutes into this, but I want to kick this over and get this thing going. So before I do, though, I do want to mention that everybody's probably seen in the last couple weeks that you've been seeing a bearded logo on the podcast and the Kiefer Brothers logo over it and everything. And, the reason being for that is because, nothing's going to change in the podcast other than I'm just going to have Chris and Casey on a lot more as well. But, Chris and Casey wanted to bring the Fall Podcast under the Kiefer Brothers balloon because they find a lot of value in it, and they like what I'm doing and like what I've built here, and I just want to keep it growing. So basically, it's just, another entity of Kiefer Brothers, and we're just merging the two together. So nothing's going to change, like I said, other than having Chris and Casey on more, which I think is going to be a huge benefit because the knowledge that those guys bring is, top notch. So, and I think everybody enjoys that as well. So with that being said, the last thing I need to say is go over to kieferbros.com because we have a ton of exclusive discount codes going on. And any product that we use, on the Kiefer Brothers side, there's probably a code for it. And if you go to our website, kieferbros.com, you can get those codes and everybody can use them. So head over to keeferbros.com, and all these codes are on there, and you can see all the products that we use and a lot of video content along with the YouTube channel, Kiefer Brothers YouTube channel, and the Fall YouTube channel too. So every one of these podcasts, if you guys want to listen to them on YouTube, you can do that as well. So long-winded, I know. I'm going to get over to this part 1 with Chuck here, so I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'm going to let Chuck take it from here. All right, on the phone again with me today, one of my good buddies from the Show Me State, Chuck Weldon. What's going on, man?
Oh, not much, buddy. How are you?
Doing good. Hanging out in my basement right now. Just actually went out and glassed some deer tonight with my daughter and my wife and the dog. Loaded up in the pickup. It's a beautiful night tonight. I mean, it was only like low 60s, so the deer were out early moving in the beans. But as you know, I mean, they're kind of getting slower moving into the beans now. They're kind of getting to that point where it's like velvet's going to start shedding here in a little bit, and they're going to start hiding a little bit more. So
right. Well, you've been to my place. I was an idiot this year, and I planted the field behind my behind my house to corn. And my dad actually dumps supplements and corn in the pasture behind his house, which borders my cornfield. So I have to walk 100 yards to go look at the deer. So I didn't make it out to look tonight, but it's a gorgeous night here too. Yeah, we were in like the 50s this morning, and it's probably down into the low 70s, upper 60s right now. So
yep. Well, I was gonna say, from your Instagram, I mean, you could damn near watch all the deer from your hot tub.
I do. If I didn't have this little 5 acres of corn behind the house, I've joked forever that I was going to shoot one naked out of the hot tub sometime, but nobody wants to see that. So,
well, if you knew the farmer that put in the crops, I'd be giving him hell.
Yeah. Well, my wife, she keeps asking me why I planted it back there too, because our little dog likes to get in there and make her own personal corn maze, and we'll spend hours on end hollering at her. So I don't know that I'll get to plant corn behind the house anymore.
Well, I mean, you can do it in strips, though. Why don't you do, like, you know, a tractor row of strip of corn, and then do beans and corn and beans, or whatever you got to do, and just at the end of them put some mineral out, because you guys can put mineral in your county, right?
We're still very, very lucky here. In fact, in this county, Davies County, we still can supplemental feed and put out mineral. And Missouri actually, I don't know if they got their head on straight or what, but they actually reduced the size of our CWD zone this year. So some of the counties that had been prohibited for that have actually now got to go back to doing it. But we were never unable to do it here. So yeah, man, it's my favorite thing to do in the summertime.
Yep, I'm jealous a little bit, because I'm actually bordering a CWD county, well, a couple CWD counties here in Michigan, and we can't do any of that, any mineral, any baiting. So I went heavy on the food plots this year and got some summer food in. And I was lucky, though, on one of my farms. My brother-in-law, he farms it, he owns it and farms it. He actually put winter wheat in, and he's not gonna, after he took the straw and the weed off, he is not gonna do anything to the field until next spring. So he let me go in there and plant a whole bunch of food. So awesome. I got a little bit of late season food, but I'm starting to realize that, obviously, I mean, food's a little better than not having food. But this year, my pictures, man, they're just, you know, this summer, you know, I've got a couple of good bucks, but they're just not what they used to be when there's either beans or corn. And on one hand, I'm like, man, that's awesome. He's going to let me plant when he's, you know, does the years that he has wheat. But then it's like, I wonder how the hunting season is going to be, because I did put 2 plots in Nebraska's for some late season, you know, because late season is going to be kind of my go-to, I'm hoping, you know, when the snow kind of hits and those plots are still kind of green. I got them popping right now, but like, we haven't had any rain, man, since I planted the darn thing. So it's like, I mean, maybe an inch of rain in the last month and a half. It's been drier than a popcorn fart over here. So
it's the opposite here. In fact, I was watching, and I'm an hour north of Kansas City, but I believe it was yesterday. We are they call it a water record, which I don't know what that is. I don't think it's actual rainfall, but we're 2 inches from setting an all-time water record in Kansas City. for I don't know. They said it ends the end of September. I don't understand all of it, but we've been so wet here, just like the entire Midwest. We were forever getting a crop in the ground. Then we turned off extremely dry for about 30, 45 days, and I don't know how much rain we've had in August. In fact, I don't even have all my plots planted. We finished up. We did about 8 or 9 of them there. I don't know, be 2 weeks ago Thursday, I think, and then it's rained pretty much ever since. So if you need some, I'd be happy to share some with you if I could.
Well, push them over this way, man, because it's getting ridiculous a little bit. I mean, the good thing is, like you just said, you had a cold morning this morning, and we've been getting some colder mornings, but it's been really heavy dew in the mornings. And honestly, I didn't realize how much that still helps, and it's really, really made the plots, like, at least, bud and get out of the ground and pop a little bit. But to get up and get lush, I just checked on one tonight, and it's really spotty, but it's coming up. So We'll see. I mean, we got some time here, and I planted them a little bit late, but I usually plant my fall plots, around the 1st of August, just because I've had the best luck with them planting around those times. So we'll see.
Right. And that all depends on the year. Mark Dury told me one time, he said, plan to plant your fall plots. Look for the first chance of rain before the 1st of August. And I got bit on that several times that, the weatherman, National Weather Service, that's a government agency, so they're not always right. And so I've planted my stuff as early as mid-July, and then I was actually I just had an episode of our show that featured me air this past week, and it was August 13th last year when I planted my plots, and we turned off a little. We were, of course, in a major drought last year, and turned off wet, and I had some of the best plots I'd ever had this past fall. So, barring a frost, man, you should be all right.
Yeah, I hope so. We should be good. I tried something new this year. I got some box blinds. I got some Amish around us that build some good box blinds, and I had them build me some box blinds that I can shoot bows out of, and I put them up on stilts. So, because I'm hunting a farm, that's a lot of fence rows, wooded fence rows, but there's not trees big enough to get in. So this is a way for me to be able to get in and kind of go a little more undetected with the scent and everything, get it sealed right up. And my wife, she's not really that fond of heights either, so it's nice for her to climb up there and still be able to bow hunt as well. So it's
I don't want to sit here and pimp our TV show, but we worked a partnership with Banks Blinds, and they sent me a blind, and I tell you what, I'm about to become a full-time blind hunter. I've hunted out of the box blinds and the pop-up blinds and all that, and I'm excited to. I think I figured out where I'm going to put it, and kind of a fence row deal like you're talking, and buddy. Chuck's going to hunt some comfort this fall. So
you know what, man? It's funny you mentioned the Banks blinds. I know Mitch pretty well, Banks, and I've got to know him over the last couple of years because he sponsors, our show, Rival Wild, with Keefers and everything as well. And Casey and I, this last fall, hunted a lot out of a box blind in Kansas because they make that steel skid system. And I don't know if you got that with your stump blind, but you can hook that to the back of an electric Ranger, and you can take that damn thing wherever you want. And in Kansas, it is really tricky to find a tree in the area you want to be in. And Casey and I've said it before, and Chris as well. I mean, our deer in Kansas are so nomadic. They're like caribou. They don't really even know where they're going until they get there, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like we've found more mature deer out in the middle of CRP fields. I mean, giant CRP fields that literally you go out there and put a Banks right in the middle of the CRP with not a tree a couple 100 yards around you, and they'll come to you for some odd reason. And Casey and I bow hunted out of that, oh man, a lot, and you see Mark Drew doing it a lot, and it's like, man, maybe he's onto something, and a lot of people, they give people flack for it, but I'm like, just like you said, I like hunting in comfort. You can get in that damn thing, and those Banks blinds, those things seal tight. You know what I mean? You can't, there's no scent getting out of those things hardly at all, if any at all. And
Right.
it's comfortable. You can get away with so much, and it's a great way to get, your kids involved. It's a great way, to get new hunters involved and get up there and just sit in a nice chair and just enjoy it. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is enjoy it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just hope I'm awake when the shooter steps out, because usually, yeah, I'm up in a knotty oak tree or something that I can't sit down in because I got a big knot sticking out my back, so I got to stand up for 3 hours, and so yeah, I'm excited about that this fall.
Yep. I will tell you though, I mean, not just a banks, but any box blind is difficult to film out of, and
Oh yeah.
it took Casey and I a little bit to figure out what we wanted to do as far as filming, but we built a little apparatus just out of 2x4s. In the floors of those banks, they're basically OSB floors, but it's got carpet
Sure.
in them.
Right.
And we built basically something that we could hook a tree arm to, and we put it all the way to the back of it, and we drilled it right to the floor. And man, that thing, having a tree arm in there, and I've taken a tripod in there quite a bit too, but having a tree arm in there and being able to maneuver a little bit, and you're kind of doing the backstrap ballet every once in a while to try to get around and film some deer, but
Right.
it's you find a way and you make it work. So it's got its pluses and its minuses, but they are comfortable though, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a self filmer too, so any a tree or a blind of any sort is difficult for me. But I got the fourth arrow system, and it's got the tripod. I don't know what they call it, tripod attachment. So essentially, you can put your actual camera arm on top of a tripod, and allows you a lot more mobility. So we'll see how it works out this fall. I haven't got it up yet. I've been waiting for that perfect deer to show up to figure out which farm I'm going to put mine on, and then I've got a couple different opportunities, so I might be sending an order form into Mr. Banks, so I can get a couple
There you
more
go.
of them. So
Well, speaking of the fall, I've got a bone to pick with you first here. And a little bit ago, you mentioned that, obviously everybody that's listening, we're about 13 minutes into this, but Chuck Weldon, I've had him on before. I'm just going to kind of give you a little intro. You and I have known each other for a while now, and you are part of the Whitetail Fix show on Sportsman's Channel. And when did Splits air?
Well, our prime airing for that, I think, will be it was this past Sunday.
Okay,
is our prime airing.
Yeah,
and we air at some odd times, the week prior to that. But
Yep.
The prime airing was Sunday. Yeah.
So you were chasing a deer last year, and you and I talked about this on the podcast. What we did back a couple months ago. Anyway, back in the winter, you were chasing a 200-inch deer, and ultimately the neighbor ended up, taking him. But the bone I have to pick with you is, what are you doing passing up too short? I mean, come on, man. If you need someone to come down there and just slip in a tree with you and take a bow, I mean, I'll oblige.
Well, and I was putting up some Instagram stories and Snapchat stories when I was hunting that deer, and I take a picture of the viewfinder or whatever, and people said, you're what are you passing that deer for? And when you've got a 200 pluser running around, you don't tell them, well, I'm hunting a 200-inch deer, because you
Exactly.
don't want to, you don't want to show all your cards by any means. But man, I just couldn't do it. I mean, that deer was so unpredictable. But I knew that he was still around, and the fact that I got a picture of him in November this past season, which the previous season I didn't. I mean, every picture I got of him was in August, and then I had a fluke encounter with him in December. I knew the deer was still around, and I was hunting a farm. I would say I've never really hunted Kansas, but I would say it's probably pretty similar to Kansas in the fact that it's a huge CRP farm with just some finger draws on it, but it butts up to a huge timber on the neighbor. And I knew that, and we're a large ag area. I knew that deer was still around, and I could not how would you, I mean, I won't use the language on your podcast that we would probably use crawling out of the tree, but can you imagine shooting that deer, and as you're sliding down out of the tree to go grab a hold of him, you look up and, there stands your target deer, on the hill waiting to come into your food plot. I mean, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And I've shot a lot of really, really good deer in my life. And that was the only person any more upset about that, me not killing that deer is my wife. Cause I told her, I said, honey, if I ever shoot a 200 incher, I said, I may just hang it up for a while. And she was livid that I didn't kill it. But, and I probably, well, I know I was lying to her when I said that, but anyway, but I couldn't do it. I mean, he's Too Short was an incredible deer, and probably, old enough, but I thought, man, what, and it's a lease farm, and I lease it with Mike Marsteller from our television show, and we've kind of got a gentleman's agreement that, we'll only shoot one buck off. It's the lease itself is several different tracks. And so we'll only shoot one buck per tract, so,
yep, I got you.
So I wasn't gonna, try to, break that little gentleman's agreement. And I mean, I just couldn't do it.
Well, in hindsight, okay, let's say you're not hunting a 200-inch deer, and let's say Too Short. Explain Too Short quickly for everybody. Give them an audio visual, if you will.
Well, I gave him the name Too Short, and it's a common theme around here for some reason. But his G2s were extremely short, and we have that in a lot of deer around here. But I mean, his G2s weren't much longer than his brow tines. But he was still probably still pushing 150. He was heavy. His 3s and 4s were long. He didn't have the longest main beams, 16, 17 inches wide. I think he'd have pushed 150 on the gross side. And he was probably 4 years old, but, just those short G2s it's just a kind of a common theme. And it's like, if we let them go another year around here, then, they'll come out of it the next year. And I shouldn't say come out of it, but they'll, the 2s will catch or exceed the 3s. And that was probably the only thing that was, that and a 200 incher that was holding me back. I mean, had there not been a 200 incher on there, yeah, I mean, I'd have ended my season in October when I had the first encounter with him, probably.
Well, that's what I was getting at. If you're not chasing splits, that first encounter you had with him, and I totally get why you did it, because you, like you said on the show too, I mean, that deer splits could have been staging up inside the timber, just sending Too Short out there, and just making sure everything's okay before, because it's in October, those deer are going to show their face usually last couple minutes of daylight, and especially in a food plot. But that's what I was kind of getting at. I mean, you had great footage of that deer self-filming over the shoulder. I mean, basically in your lap. All you had to do was hit record and let him walk in the frame and end him at 18 yards. And I was like, oh my gosh. But, last time you and I did a podcast, and Justin was on it as well, we had talked about how you have the uncanny ability to just pass up deer after deer and buck after buck that, I mean, a majority of the hunting population would indulge themselves on, and I commend you for that, because, you do have an impressive wall, and you have an impressive knack to be able to get on very mature deer and, pass up these deer year after year, but also in the end, get after them and ultimately, succeed and meet your goal with these deer. And that just blows my mind. And that's why I love talking to you about hunting. And I ask you a lot of stuff about it. So, but that was my question when I was watching the show. I wanted to text you and be like, what are you doing? But I understood what you were doing, but it's just,
well, and I appreciate your comments, and I have killed a lot of really nice deer, but two things I don't have a net boon, and I don't have a 200 incher, and there's a lot of hunters in this world that will say the same thing, and I really thought that I was going to be able to to kill two birds with one stone. I think Splits ended up netting like 211 non-typical, and he was 190 something, I think, as a typical. So I could have killed a 200 incher in a net boon, at the in one release of an arrow if I could have hit him. But too short. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. Yes, I'd have probably shot him had it not been for Splits, but especially as visible as he was. I mean, maybe the first time I might have passed him because it was early in the season, but the second time, hell no. You're gonna beg that bad for me to shoot at you, then I'm probably gonna shoot at you.
Well, you had three good encounters with him, didn't you?
Yeah, 3 or 4 different encounters, and of course, being an editor, this. What you didn't see on the October encounter was that lasted 30 minutes probably. I mean, he's broadside. He comes out broadside at 40, and then he eats to 30, and then he stays at 30 for 15 minutes. I mean, I was starting to lose a little bit of light, I think, when he finally, if I remember correctly, when he finally came broadside at 10 yards in front of me. And at that point in time, I was like, I could, because we had went through a D4 drought, and then we went from one night being in a major drought to a near record flood basically overnight. And we had a hell of a time getting our crop out. And I could have it would have been very easy to say, okay, here's content for a TV show. Here's a notch on a buck tag. Now I can focus on getting the crop out of the ground, but couldn't do it. So,
and realistically, how much did you fight with yourself in the tree that night as he's walking by? I mean, was the little guy on your right shoulder telling you, "Hey, Chuck, just do it, and just kind of fighting him off"?
I had the bow in my hand at one point in time, and then I said, no, I can't do it. The second time, I think the second time was when he chased the doe in. I think I said on the show that I didn't know what buck it was. I knew what buck it was, and I didn't even pick my bow up. The third time, I'm frustrated because again, I'm a self filmer, and I've climbed this damn tree I don't know how many times. And like I said on that episode, I'm hunting a little half-acre food plot. I got thousands of acres to hunt, and I'm focused on this one little half-acre food plot. And I've climbed this damn tree I don't know how many times with bow, rattling horns, backpack, camera arm, camera. I had to start doing CrossFit this winter just to get in shape, just to pack all the crap up and down the tree. I mean, literally, just was I started just leaving my camera arm up there, and then just taking my camera and my bow and stuff. But when I saw him in the neighbor's timber and grunted him in and snort wheezed at him, and he came in, I said, "USOB." It was one of them deals. I was searching Facebook every day trying to find out if somebody was bragging about killing a 200-inch deer, because I said, I'm going to put an end to this. I was frustrated.
Right.
And then after that deer got killed, and I mean, it took the wind out of my sail a little bit, and at the same time, it was kind of relief to know that, all right, well, I can kind of give up on it. And it would have taken a pretty special deer after that to walk out in front of me to release an arrow. I was like, if it's the first time since, I think it was the first year since 2006 I hadn't shot a buck with my bow. And that was one thing I had stuck in the back of my head was, man, that's a hell of a streak. I don't really want to break that streak, but at the same time, I'm not gonna shoot a buck for the sake
of a streak or something.
Of a streak, it's just not my style. So
yep. Now, and I could be a little wrong on this, but I think you and I are talking a little bit. And Splits, the 200-inch deer that you were chasing, the neighbor killed it, and it was a gentleman from Kansas, correct?
Yep.
So he had came up, but you found out that Splits was dead during season, correct?
Yeah, it was in like November. He killed that deer. He killed that deer, I think, a week or two after gun season. It was right after Thanksgiving, I think. So yeah, that's about the time I found out about it.
And then you and I and Justin jumped on a podcast. Oh gosh, I can't remember when it was. Was it December or was it in the season?
No, I think season was over with. I can't remember. I can't remember if it was pre ATA or post ATA. But
Yeah, I can't remember either. But what had happened is this guy that shot splits actually listens to the podcast, correct?
I don't. I think what happened was, and I could be wrong, but I think that the guy that I actually leased the ground off of, which he doesn't have Facebook, but I had posted a link when that podcast went live. I posted a link on my Facebook, and I don't know if he found out about it that way or had found your podcast some other way. But when this guy had to track splits, so he got a hold of all the neighboring landowners, which that one neighboring landowner is the guy that I leased from. And I think he called Mr. Tony and said, hey, I think you ought to listen to this. I think this guy's talking about the deer that you killed. So he listened to it. Didn't know me from Adam. Doesn't really know the area. He's from Kansas. It's about an hour and 25-minute drive from his place to mine, or to that farm. But he knew it and reached out to me on Facebook and said, hey man, I think I killed this splits deer that you're talking about. And you want to, first of all, you want to be proud of the hunter. Hey, congratulations. Then I find out, he's a preacher. I said, well, hell, I can't even cuss the fact that I found out that the guy killed the deer because he's a preacher. But I got a chance to. He was nice enough to let me come down to his home in Kansas. And this day and age, to invite strangers to your home is somewhat unheard of. But he was nice enough to let me come to his home and see the deer, film a little piece for our TV show, and we got a chance to visit. And he killed a world class deer, and I made a new friend out of the deal. We text all the time now, and so it's one thing that I've always said is whether it's on TV or it's not on TV, for some odd reason, every hunt of mine has a hell of a story behind it, and this is just another great story, and that's worth as much as having the antlers on the wall. Is a new friend, a great story, and so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and that I've been talking about it a little bit earlier on some earlier podcasts here in the last couple of weeks, but the story that you had right there, obviously, yes, you would love to have taken the deer yourself and had him on your wall for a talking point, and for people to come over and see him and everything and say, I shot a 200-inch deer. But the success is all in how you determine success. I mean, there's some guys out there and gals that probably need to kill a buck every year, or need to kill a deer to think it's a successful year. And I won't lie to you, I used to think like that, but there's little successes every year. And last year I had shot my first 4-year-old in Michigan. I've shot a couple out of state, but in Michigan I shot my first 4-year-old. Jim Abbott's big story. Everybody's probably hating that I'm bringing it up again, but and I didn't hit him very good. I hit him high shoulder and didn't end up killing him and everything. But he was my number one, and then my number 2 buck was a deer I called Bomb Pop, and he's actually that hunt is gonna air on Rival Wild this year. And I went out with a decoy on November 10th, I believe it was, and grunted him in to the decoy. And to 35 yards, I was self-filming, and the pain that I'm going through here, but trying to capture the hunt and then, ultimately capture a good shot on him with, and get him down is near impossible. And he came to 35 yards, and I had my decoy situated a little probably wrong, and he got downwind and smelt the decoy and busted out of there. And I'm up in the tree. It's early, and I'm just cussing myself in my head like, what the heck? And I was so upset. And then throughout the sit, I had like a 3-hour sit, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you know what, man? Like, you're sitting on a farm that you just had an opportunity at your number 1 buck in October, and you didn't capitalize on that. And then your number 2 buck comes in November, and both of these deer, this deer is a 125-inch Michigan buck, which is a really respectable buck. And I'm like, that's a win. I'm sitting on a farm that's 120 acres, but only 5 acres of timber on it, basically.
Right.
And it's like, that doesn't happen. Even though I don't get to bring them home and everything, I gotta take the positivity out of that, and I've got to take that as a success. And and I feel like a lot of hunters out there are, obviously you're not accepted unless you kill a big animal, and I guess that's okay if you want to say that, but that's just not how I feel about it. And it's all about, how you judge your success. And that to me was a success. I didn't kill a buck last year, and which was, like you said, a streak. I had a streak going for like 4 or 5 years of killing a Pope and Young, and last year I didn't kill one. And, I was okay with it. Like, I had a great year,
So what did you learn from it, though? That's anymore. That's what I try to get out of a hunt. I've been doing this a long time, and by no means I'm a good hunter. By no means am I a great hunter. But every hunt, I learn something from it. I don't take. I've said for years I'm gonna take. I'm gonna take notes. I'm gonna take a piece of paper. I'm gonna note the temperature, the wind direction, the moon phase. Like I said before, I carry enough stuff up the damn tree. I'm not gonna add paperweight to the backpack. But I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. But I go get in a tree stand and say, oh, I remember this wind. I remember this pressure. Yep, I'll see some deer tonight. Or, nope, God, I should have stayed home. I learned something, just like you're talking about your decoy setup. I learned something every single hunt that I go out on. And I get as much out of that, trying to figure them out. Playing chess with them, playing poker with them. Is more fun to me anymore than the actual. I don't care if you're hunting with a gun, a muzzle loader, atlatl bow, whatever. To me, it's more fun than releasing the whatever, the bullet, the broadhead, whatever it may be.
Yep.
It's like calling. And of course, every time I snort, wheeze in or grunt in a 3-year-old, I say, well, there's one I educated. I'll never see him again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so fun to figure out, what you can do and talking to him and trying to get that, get that edge. And I learned from that. And like I said, I rank that, the learning experience, over the success, it is higher to me anymore. So
I agree 100%. And that decoy situation I was in, everything that I've done with a decoy, and I've always faced the decoy to my opposite side shoulder, basically. And every situation's a little different. And I take one side antler off them usually, just because in Michigan I don't want them to look any bigger than, we don't have just giants around every corner. So I want to be able to have like a 3-year-old Pope and Young come in and just want to beat the hell out of them. So, but what I feel like I did wrong is I was sitting on the inside corner of a bean field, and I pointed him. So the inside corner was to my left, and I thought that the deer, if anything was going to come in, every time I've used a decoy, or I was with Casey or used a decoy, every time I've been in a decoy's presence, a buck decoy, the buck has always come in and faced him head on. He's always going to loop in and face him head on. So I'm trying to get him to turn where I have, a quarter and away shot at like 20 yards. And what I did is I think I put that decoy too close to the timber on the inside corner. I only gave him about 15 yards to be able to do some maneuvering. And I think I needed to get him out in the bean field a little bit farther, because he would have come, in that inside corner, but I just felt like he probably got to a certain spot where he was like, I don't have a lot of room to maneuver over there, so I'm going to just go downwind of him here. And he came in like on his butt side, and was really weird to me, just from my experiences. So I feel like the next time I ever do that, obviously I'm going to get him out from the timber a little bit farther and give him a little more room to maneuver and want to come in there and head him face on. So I don't know what's your experiences with decoys.
Well, I'm going to tell you something that, and you'll get a chuckle out of this, that I learned from a decoy experience. Now, I will say I personally have not had the greatest success with decoys. Now Matt Bullins, that used to be part of our show, he killed, I think, 3 really decent bucks. Well, really good bucks here in Missouri on my farms using a decoy. So I've had this same boss buck decoy forever. You know how the boss bucks are. They're loud. But they're effective. You know. So I had left it back at a blind location that I had, and I'm trying to kill this splits deer. So I had standing corn that I planted. Went into one of the worst droughts in history. The corn was, there really wasn't even any there. There was a little bit there. So I went in and I mowed down a little bit of corn. Kind of got this path that you can come up into in this little bitty bowl. And it's like, searching for a needle in a haystack for them to find corn to eat on. But I thought, the smell of the fresh corn, that'll bring them in. But I said, I need a decoy, just to help, maybe pull a buck up in here. So I go back to the farm where I left this decoy. The damn antlers, the mice or squirrels or something had chewed up them little plastic antlers that are on the boss buck. I said, gosh dang it, I gotta have some antlers. Well, in my basement, I've got 20-yard bow range in my basement. I had a Glendale full rut. So I go take the horns off this Glendale full rut and screw them onto this boss buck. I got farms that didn't have bucks that big on it.
Because those Glendales are like 150-inch deer, right?
Oh, yeah. And I put that on there. I took a couple pictures and sent it to – well, I said there's a couple of guys from our TV show that hunt in Michigan, and they said that'd be like a state record here, And it was – but I really do like hunting over decoys. Rod Owen, who's been in the outdoor industry for years, he's forgotten more about deer hunting than I'll ever know. He was always very successful with decoys, and he taught me quite a bit. But I personally have not had that much success with them. But I do like using them just because, even if it's a small buck that comes in and postures up. I've had mine knocked over one time by, like 100-incher, and it was, it was like, I don't know, it was like catching that rare falling star. It's not something that you see all the time. Have a buck come in and knock over your decoy, and I was like, man, that was awesome, And then after the field cleared, I went, oh damn, I got a dead deer laying out in the field. Well,
a dead plastic deer.
Yeah, what shooter's going to come into this? And it's not like a turkey, where they're going to go flog the dead one. It's. I was like, well, that sucks. And now I got to, either climb down or deal with it. So. But they're fun. I do enjoy it. But there's definitely a time and place for them. It's not something that, we open here September 15th. I certainly wouldn't recommend somebody packing a decoy out September 15th. So
right. And, with your decoy experience, have you had most of your bucks that have come up to it and postured up to it? Do they come head on, or do they come from all different directions?
Most of them, it's kind of what you hear is they're gonna circle downwind and come in head on, and that's usually the way that we've tried to post them up is where, and in me personally being a self filmer, and I think that's probably what you were trying to achieve too, was I'm trying to set it up to best get that deer to come in. I'm using the wind to set it up, but I'm also trying to posture or position that decoy that when that buck comes in and postures, it's going to give me, that broadside or quartering away shot. Because if you got it set up, I can't lay this out audio wise,
right.
but you could set it up where, realistically you could never have an ethical shot opportunity before the deer blows out, because he's obviously he's not going to stand there and make out with it. He's either going to knock it over and bug out, or he's going to realize something's up and leave anyway. So I want that opportunity that as a self filmer, that when he comes in and starts to turn and posture up, there's my moment of truth. So
Right.
it's not something that I use a lot, just for that simple fact that one, I'm a self filmer. Two, the opportunities here I think are kind of few and far between, just because we have so many stinking does. It's really hard to, it's a very magical time when you find that shooter that's not locked down in November. And three, again, like I hate to beat a dead horse here, and not everybody listening to your podcast films, but being a self filmer, I carry enough crap to the tree as it is.
Yep. No, I agree. Like that night I went in there and had that fiasco happen. I mean, I carried a PMW 300 to the tree, and I know you know what a PMW 300. It's a big camera. I took a muddy tree arm and a basin with me, and then I had this Primos Scarface decoy. I'll tell you what, I mean, I even layered down to walk through. It's snow on the ground. It's cold. I had to walk probably a half mile at least, maybe even a little farther. When I got to the tree, I was soaked. And I'm like, I remember getting to the base of the tree after I set the decoy up. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be fun. And I'm like walking seriously like a camo Michelin man through a bean field to get to my stand. And I'm like, this is absurd, and then I get up in the stand and get my layers back on, and I do an intro, and I look over, and in the bean field on the neighbors, it was already harvested, but the bean field on me, it wasn't harvested. So there was a down tree in the bean field on the edge of the timber. Well, there was like, I don't know how big it was, 20 by 20, where the tree was out. Well, the farmer couldn't get in there and get those standing beans. He got up out of his bed right there, and luckily I had good access getting in there that he couldn't see me, but got out of his bed right there and was eating on those beans. And, it was the only standing beans in that field, but in my field, like I said, was standing beans, and he just came over. I had to work him a little bit, like, I sat there and I had a grunt, and I had a bleat, a Primos can call, and that thing, I swear by that thing. But he was sitting there, and I gave him a bleat, and he'd look up, and then he'd go back to eating. And I don't think you could see my decoy, so then I'd bleat again, he'd look up, and then he'd just go back to eating. I'm like, okay, so at that time, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to throw a grunt at him and see what happens. Maybe he's in the mood to where, like, okay, there's a hot doe over there, and I'm going to go investigate. Well, I grunted, and I grunted away from him, and he looked up, and his posture changed. And I'm like, okay, I got his attention there. But then he went back to eating again, and then I gave him more of a tending grunt, like a kind of a more hard tending, like rut grunt, I guess you could say. And right after that, I mean, it was 2 seconds. It was triggered. He looked up and on a string right at me. And I'm freaking out then, filming, trying to get the camera on him and trying to get the bow in the hand and everything. And, blackout mode, as everybody says. And he comes in and just came downwind too far. And I had a hole to shoot him, but I was trying to get the camera on him, trying to range him, and then trying to pick my bow up and get full draw, and it was a debacle. That's what it was. But
talking off air, we haven't talked a single thing about what you said off air that you wanted to talk about, but you bring up the bleat. It's one thing that I've never had any success with.
Really?
Nope. I've taken Primos. I think Night and Hail had a can at one point in time. I've had the mad calls, I don't even know what they call them, but and I've taken, I'm like the poster child for 1980s hunting television shows. When you had to take a full on duffel bag to the tree with you because you had to have every gadget that there was.
Yep.
I mean that's me. I mean when I go to the tree, that is me. And well, blowing this bleat call, well, no, that didn't work. Let me get the can out. Well, that didn't work. I mean, I'm a grunt, and I just snort wheeze with my mouth. And the snort wheeze is my go-to. Now, I mean, I've used grunts to stop a deer, slow a deer down at a distance, and then once I get their attention and they kind of act like they're going to move on, then I snort wheeze at them. But I've never had any success with a bleat call. I know a lot of people have. So I'd like to. That's something I'd like to. I don't know, learn how to use it better, or I don't know. I guess maybe just experiment with it more. But that's cool that works for you.
Well, so rattling antlers for me anyway here in Michigan don't work. Out of state, I can blind rattle. I've blind rattled bucks in. I've seen bucks and rattled them in. But here, I don't even take antlers with me. I have heard from guys in Michigan saying that taking antlers with them actually in like early October and just tinkling the tines together. You see those younger bucks in food plots on your trail cams and stuff like that, just like tink, 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 like doing that. They were able to get deer to come into that. I don't know. I've never tried it. To be honest with you, I'm too scared to try it. But for me, Primos Buck Roar, the first original OG, I still use it. Still got the same one. Still awesome. And then the Primos Bleat Can Call, still got the same one. I've had those for, ever since they basically come out, 10, 15 years, whatever. And I will actually do a sequence here in Michigan where I'll do like 3 bleats with 3 soft tending grunts in the rut blind. And I've called 3-year-olds in doing that. You know what I mean? And it's worked. I mean, it doesn't work all the time. But when I see a buck like I did with him, it was like something hit me where I was like, okay, for me, a bleat call, it's not going to alert that deer like, oh God, there's a big buck over there. I can't go over there. You know what I mean? It's not going to like startle him, but if anything, it's going to be like a safe, like a, hey, I'm over here. I'm in estrus kind of thing. So I didn't think it was going to hurt me. So I let out a bleat. He heard it, looked, didn't want to commit. So after I did that 3 times, I'm like, okay, well, he's not going to commit to that. So I've got to do, the only other trick I have in my bag is a grunt. So I just did like I said, I put the grunt away from him. And obviously when his head's to the ground, I don't like calling a deer when their head's up looking at me. It's like a megaphone.
Sure.
Hey, I'm over here in the tree. Come over and smell me and look at me. I'm a hunter kind of thing.
Right.
That's what my opinion. So when he put his head back down, I just gave him a rit, just kind of like soft, like 3 short ones, kind of quick like that. And that's all it was. And you'll see on the show, if everybody watches the show, I think it's going to be episode 7, I believe. So here in a couple weeks. And he comes on a string, and that's all he needed. But honestly, and then I know I'm going to probably catch some flack for it. And it's like, why didn't you just say screw the camera and just shoot him? But me being a producer, it was kind of like one of those things, like I've had pictures of this deer all year. I've filmed him in the beans in the summer, and it was almost like, I don't know what it was. I think the producer took over me, and too, how like when I'm filming Casey or filming anybody else, it's like, that's your job. You have to film it, And I don't know if that kind of took over me as well, or if it was like, you lugged all this shit out here, you're going to do this. You're going to see it to the end, good, bad, or indifferent, you're going to do this. So I don't know really what it was, but that thought of like, screw the camera, shoot him, never really crossed my mind, to be honest with you.
It's never crossed mine, and I might have mentioned this on the last podcast, but prior and Steve Philly, who's a part of our show, him and I have been. We started this whole film adventure together back in 06, 07, something like that, and he lived in my town, Gallatin, which I live outside of town, but we were 12 miles apart. And unfortunately, he lost his father. And when his father passed away, he moved back to his original farm, which put him now at about 30, 35 minutes away. So it became harder for us to, and we worked different schedules, and that's a hard thing about being a farmer. I mean, you work an 8 to 5, or or whatever it may be. You know what time you get to go hunt. If I catch an afternoon rain and I can't get on the combine, guess what? I'm going hunting, whether I got a cameraman or not. So that started my whole self filming situation. And then if you add on top of it, you've got a television show, obligations to sponsors, and things like that to produce good quality content. And then I think it becomes just a prideful thing that hey, I'm gonna get this done. But point of my story, before I started self filming, I was probably about number 2 when it came to bow shot on quality of shot or accuracy or whatever you want to call it, on the group of guys on Whitetail Fix. And when I started self filming, my shot quality went to total hell. I've had to hire dogs, I've had to track overnight, things like that, and it's not because I don't practice and I'm not still a good archer. That just what you said, that producer mindset takes over. And is he in frame? And then all of a sudden, crap, he's gonna take a step, or he's gonna walk out of frame, and he ended up rushing shots, and so there's definitely a negative that comes along with being a producer, because I'm like you. I think that gets in your head, and I want my stuff to look good when people see it, but at the same time, I want people to say, well, I don't want people to say, damn, he's a hell of a producer, but he can't shoot worth a damn.
Right.
So, man, it makes it tough.
But that's part of it too. I mean, a lot of people out there, the big wave too is guys like you and I out there that don't have a TV show that want a TV show, and
right.
that self film and do that. So it's really relatable as well. But obviously they don't have obligations to sponsors as well either,
Sure.
or obligations of getting a storyline. So it might be something where it's like, okay, screw that camera. But I've been filming my hunts since I was 16. I'm 32 now, and there hasn't been many times that I've went in the woods without a camera, whether it be a GoPro or a 300 or a 5D or whatever it is.
Yep.
There hasn't been many times I haven't went in the woods without it. So it's just, I think it's something that's like, that's all I know now,
Right.
kind of thing. And maybe that took over too, and it's like, well, you need to do this kind of thing. I don't know. So in hindsight, going back, would I change it? I don't think I'd change it. You know what I mean? Now, yeah, I'd changed my decoy setup, but trying just saying screw the camera. No, I mean, I can tell you what I did though. That night when I got back, I called one of my good buddies and I said, hey, I need someone to film in the morning. Can you film for me? And he's like, yeah. I said, all I need you to do is press record and make sure it's in focus. That's it.
Yep.
I will do the rest after we get him on the ground.
Yep.
That's
exactly.
it. And we went out and saw another shooter that morning too, but he was just too far away. And what my number 3 buck actually. So that was a success as well. And you learn something from that. So
yeah, that's what, like I said, that's what I love the most, is just learning from it and how to capitalize on it next time. And you and I have done some seminars, I think 1 or 2 in the past together here in Missouri, and I tell people all the time when I get asked to do them, and I don't feel like I'm qualified to do them, but
and me both.
but I go do them, and I truly believe this, but I think that hunting is not something you can teach. You're either born a hunter or you're not born a hunter. Now, are some people better hunters than other people? Yes, but can you learn from other hunters? Absolutely, you can learn from other hunters. But the biggest thing is it's life in general. You learn from your mistakes, and you capitalize on try to capitalize on things you've done well, and capitalize on the mistakes that you've made and learn from them. And that's like I said, that's becoming one of my favorite. That was what's so frustrating about splits is it wasn't the fact that I wasn't smart enough to get on him. I just didn't know where the hell he was living, and if I'd had access to all the property around me, I have no doubt that, I'd have figured out where that deer was. In fact, I called one neighbor and I said, does anybody hunt this ground? He said, yeah, they do. And I said, well, I don't want to hunt it. I said, I'd just like to go in there and just drop about 10 trail cameras on it. And he says, well, no. He said, I got a guy. And that was all I wanted to do was just figure out where the damn deer lived. It wasn't so much killing him, just, what hole was he hiding in?
Right.
And that was the most frustrating thing was, I knew I wasn't hunting a ghost, but, I wasn't hunting a frequent visitor either, So just learning from every hunt is like I said, that is probably just as rewarding or more rewarding to me than actually, punching a tag.
I hate to stop it right there, but Chuck and I recorded a podcast for 3.5 hours. So, I mean, just one question after another when we were talking, and it just kept going, and it was great information, and we didn't want to stop. And, he was good with it, I was good with it, so we just kept going. So, like I said, this is going to be a 3-parter. This is part 1 of 3. So, on the next episode, next part, we're going to talk about kicking it off with trail cams, how Chuck uses trail cams from the summer to October, in September, October, November, how he uses them differently, and it's some really cool information. But that's not all. There's a ton more information in this next podcast as well. So also, I do want you guys to go to iTunes if you could, please, and subscribe to the podcast. Do a 5-star rating if you would. Those 5 stars that are right there, if you could just click 5, that'd be great. Leave a review too. I mean, I do have a few reviews on there, but I'd like to get some more in there. Honestly, just go in there, leave it. You can leave it, you can mark it unknown. Nobody has to know who you are either. So just go in there, leave a review. That'd be great. And again, I appreciate you guys subscribing, supporting the podcast. And, this is part 1 of 3. So looking forward to part 2. Until next time, thanks for listening.